I'm a little sick this week. Nothing serious, I hope, but haven't been really feeling that well. And so, of course, still in my studio, still haven't decorated, still got some boxes I need to unpack. But I do have a podcast for you. And my podcast today is a pretty interesting one that I recorded with an author from Eastern Tennessee named John Bukowski. We're going to talk a little bit with him and learn a little bit about writing, the writing process, his work, and all kinds of fun stuff. It was a very interesting conversation. Anyways, John Bukowski.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. Blues, women, and blues. I'm here, I'm there.
So, John, how are you?
Very good, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
I got to be honest with you, and this has been a theme for the last couple of interviews that I've done in my new studio. But I'm jealous of your background. I'm jealous of your setup, John. You got you got a book. Yeah, you got a bookcase full of books and books that I assume you wrote, right?
Right. Well, you can see I've got my two currently published books, Project Suicide and Checkout Time. And that cabinet also holds some of my videos. I'm an avid movie buff, and I've got probably about 650 titles in DVD.
Do you still watch the DVDs? I mean, really? And do you find yourself actually going, yeah, I feel like watching a movie, and then you pull it off the shelf, open up the container, take the DVD out?
I will admit, first thing I do is get on our cable and see if that movie is showing somewhere that I get for free, because I don't pay for movie services.
Oh, okay. So you're not a Netflix person or whatever.
No,
I feel like streaming, though, for the most part, I completely got rid of my movie collection when streaming came along. But the reason why I point out your background is because I just, as my viewers know, and have been following, I just moved into this new studio a couple months ago. And I have yet to decorate. The space is empty behind me. I've been tempted to put up like a shower curtain or something just to have something to look at, or a cheap drawing. But I will say that the rest of the house has been almost settled. So decorations will come. Maybe the next couple of podcasts as I record in this format. Yeah, I won't have such a boring backdrop behind me. But I like how you got some promotion back there. So let's get into it. You're an author, and those are books that you've written.
Yes, correct. I have two books, as I currently say, although two more are coming out this year. The two books are Project Suicide, which I wrote and was published in 2022. And there's an example of that cover. It's a story of how a cure for Alzheimer's disease is perverted into an assassination drug. Now, high-profile politicians are killing themselves, and only a drunken genius can save the country.
And this is fiction.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a plausible scenario.
That's what, after I wrote it, that's what a lot of people said. They went like, "Wow, that could be really happening now."
That's right. And what's the other book on the shelf?
The other book came out in 2023, was published. It's called Checkout Time. It's about a mysterious bomber known only as Conrad Hilton, who is trying to extort money from a hotel chain. He's pursued by a handsome government researcher and a beautiful FBI agent until Conrad turns the tables and the hunters become the hunted.
Wow. Conrad Hilton?
Yeah, that was, people said to me, aren't you worried about, you're using a name of a famous person that with the Hilton chain? And I said, he is out there in the public domain. It's like, it's like if I called him Cary Grant, no one's going to come after me.
To be fair, there could be more than one person with the name Conrad Hilton.
Absolutely. And it's a pseudonym, so it could be anything.
Yeah, it could be anything. He could have just the character could have just picked the name,
As a matter of fact, I came up with that idea before I was even writing fiction novels. probably back about 15 years ago when I was on a business trip in a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the top floor and I sat on the bed and looked up and there was a trap door. And I said to myself, you could put anything in that. And then I started, over the years, started going through my head, what would you put in there? You could put mob money, and then you'd have a certain type of thriller. You could put drugs. You could put government documents or microfilm or whatever, and you'd have a spy thriller. Because I'm a bit of a pyromaniac, I like anything that burns or explodes. I should have already been a combat engineer or something in the military. But my immediate inclination was to have a bomb in there. And then I thought, why would you put a bomb in there just for the fun of it? Well, he did it to extort money. Pay me or I bomb your hotels. And that's when I came up with the idea, this would make a good book about an evil genius who is out to make some money for himself. And it just so happens that this FBI agent and this handsome government researcher are on the same floor of the hotel when he sets off his first bomb.
It's an intriguing premise. And so you write a lot of fiction, right?
Yep. Although over my career, I wrote a lot of nonfiction. I have a really kind of different career for a fiction writer. I started off as a veterinarian. I practiced veterinary medicine in the 80s. I went back to school and got a master's and a PhD in public health. I like to joke I'm the most overeducated fiction writer in the country.
You're probably, you just might be, actually. That's a lot.
But anyway, I did that for about 20 years and in public health epidemiology. And then when I retired from corporate setting, I did medical writing. So for quite a few years, about 10 years, I wrote journal articles and opinion pieces and website content and things like that. So I kind of gotten into the fiction writing through my nonfiction writing, even in early as grade school, but going through all my education. I had three great passions. One was reading and writing, English reading and writing. I loved my English classes. Another one was history. I, to this day, love to read history, especially military history. And the third one was science. And when you focus on science, especially I wanted to get in the veterinary school, and that's a lot of focus, you kind of have to put the other things on the back burner. So I'm really coming back to one of my original loves. Been an avid reader all my life, reader of fiction and nonfiction. And I'm coming back to that, really.
It seems like a good foundation for becoming someone and not to put you into some sort of box or categorize you or whatever, but it seems to be like how Ian Fleming developed the James Bond character, and he had this nice combination of resources that he drew from, and then he created this line of fiction stories based on these experiences that he had and so forth. How does your work, your prior work, I would guess, sort of fit into the books that you write now?
Well, you're right. There's an old adage, write what you know. And some people will tell you, no, don't listen to that. But I'll tell you that when you write what you know, it becomes a whole lot easier. The research is easier. It's much more genuine. People can tell when somebody is speaking who knows what they're talking about, even if they throw in a bunch of BS, which is what fiction is. It's a lie. You're like a con man, but you can't just start by throwing out the BS. You've got to first sell people. And that's where the background helps. If I write something like in Project Suicide, which has to do with some genetics and genetic manipulation of a drug and the genes involved with Alzheimer's disease, I'm playing with the facts, but the basics are correct because I already know them. I can interpret them. I know about biology, molecular biology, histopathology, all those things. And so people say, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to believe the rest of it.
Right.
And I think that's really true. That's why, as you said, Ian Fleming wrote spy books. He was in the spy business. John Grisham was a lawyer. He wrote law stuff. Michael Crichton is one of my influences. He wrote medical technical stuff because he was a physician.
Right.
There's a reason for that. You can do it as a plumber, but it takes an awful lot of research, commitment, and learning, which you can shortcut if you already know.
It's interesting you say right when you know that that old adage, whether or not you follow it or not. I firmly believe you should write what you know. But there are plenty of people that don't know much, in which case then they should probably do a little bit of research. Do people read you into your characters?
They do, and they should, because whether you're writing fiction, or I did a lot of stage acting too, in New Jersey and Southern Ohio, community theater, that kind of stuff. And when you're building a character, you're bringing it through you. It's somebody, even if it's somebody else's experience, you're bringing it through your own experience. And writers are just like actors. We're people watchers. We look for interesting people we meet, people we see somewhere, and they all become grist for characters. And so my characters are me. They're people I know. They're people I wish I knew. There's people I've seen in the movies. They're all used. All of this material is used to make a character or characters. And so, yeah, I think people should see it coming through you, because just like Stephen King, who's also one of my influences, I think he's great at writing characters.
Yeah.
He says that in his book, The Dark Half, we're each human beings, plural. We have the person we show to the world, and then we have all the other things we really are, which we keep suppressed. And the writer doesn't have to keep them suppressed. As a matter of fact, he has to let them out to inhabit his characters, inhabit his world. Otherwise, the writing will feel suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny thing. It's like I said, I teach several writing classes, and I teach one on doing research. And the thing is, when you've done research for a book, you're going to do a lot more research than you put in the book. You don't want to run the risk of the book becoming a technical manual.
Right. Right.
The research is only important to sell the reader the stories about the characters. But you're gonna do a lot more research than you put in. But the very fact that you did it makes the writing sound stronger. Just like with a character actor, you built an entire world for your character, even though a lot of it doesn't show on stage. But the fact that you built it, the fact that you created a life for this person, will show up in your acting. And it's a subtle thing, but I think it's real.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely see that. I am also an actor, and every role that I've ever performed is is half the written lines and the intention of the writer, and then half the me bringing my interpretation of that character.
Directors are interviewed where they'll say the thing they hate the most is when an actor says to them, "What is my motivation?" That's the actor's job. You've got the words on the page, you're stuck with those, but the way you deliver them, the feeling behind them, the way you respond to another person's character, that's the actor. He has to be self-motivated. He has to have already built that in. And like I said, it's very similar with building characters and writing. They each have to have their own voice. And frankly, if you have 2 or even 3 characters speaking in dialogue, if they're strong characters, recognizable characters, you don't even need much attribution. He said, Bob said, Muriel said.
Right.
People will be able to tell. You'll throw some of that in just so they don't get confused, but people will be able to tell who's speaking.
Right. Yeah. Now, if the characters are well defined,
right.
And each of them has their their characteristics established, but that's good writing. And I don't know, how many people are really capable of getting us to that point.
Well, as Elmore Leonard, another one of my big influences.
Love him.
said, when you write it, read it. If it sounds like somebody wrote dialogue, rewrite it. Because it's supposed to sound like people speaking as they would normally. And I will even say that when I'm really going good, I don't feel that I'm writing dialogue. I feel like I'm taking dictation.
Yeah.
I'm listening to 2 characters or 3 characters talk back and forth, and I'm just writing it down.
You're living in East Tennessee, right?
Yes, we actually split our time between East Tennessee and Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, okay. Was this a move that just brought you in retirement? You moved out there to take it easy a little bit?
Yeah, kind of. I don't really think of it as retirement because I'm still working every day. I'm working as a writer now, as a fiction writer. I was working as a technical writer before, but yeah, it's a beautiful area. We wanted someplace south of the snow belt, and that really feels good on a day like today. They're getting socked in over in Dayton, Ohio, for example.
Yeah.
But we spent a lot of years in Southern Ohio, and we've got a lot of friends there, a lot of watering holes and restaurants that we really love. So we go back there every summer for about 4 months. Got a condo there, and then we come back to our mountain home in the hills of Eastern Tennessee in September and stay through the winter.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be a nice, inspiring place to just sit and write.
Yeah. I'm looking out my window now. I see the trees. There's a hill in the not too distance. It's kind of pretty, beautiful and right now it's a little bare, but beautiful in the fall, beautiful in the spring.
Does location factor into your writing?
I think it does. At least initially, you'll find you write better some places than others. Ernest Hemingway, I'm naming all my influences here. Ernest Hemingway was asked if some places were better for writing, and he said no, but I'm a better writer in some places. And so to a certain extent, you have to have the discipline to write wherever you happen to be at. But you should feel comfortable in the space. It should be a place that's quiet, private, that you can concentrate on what you're doing. Stephen King, famous for when he was struggling, holding 2 or 3 jobs, he would come home at 2 a.m. I think he had a job at a laundromat. He would come home and sit in the furnace room of their trailer and prop a typewriter on his lap, and he would write for an hour. You got to have that kind of stick-to-itiveness. Some places can be inspirational. Certainly here in Eastern Tennessee, like you said, it's beautiful. And checkout time, frankly, takes place between Southern Ohio and Eastern Tennessee.
There you go.
Because I'm really familiar with that stretch of road with both environments. And so that kind of helped me. Plus, I'm a big believer that too many people write. We get tremendous numbers of things about New York City, Los Angeles, Paris. Then you have people like Dan Brown, who writes about the fanciest places in the world with the fanciest people and stuff. I'm more down to earth. I like to see things about regular people in Middle America. And I don't think we have enough of that. I think it's still fresh. Whereas, New York City, you could live in New York City and write about New York City, but everybody else and his brother has, going back decades, centuries.
Yeah, it's an inspiring place, but it's not. It shouldn't be all encompassing for the entire culture. And the same is true for LA and film. Obviously it makes sense that you see LA, that so many movies and productions take place in Los Angeles, even if they're not filmed there. They do take place there.
a lot of times it's logistics too. I mean, they're in LA or they're right by LA.
Yes, everybody lives there. It's like but it is nice and refreshing to see other places get their representation. Ohio, you don't get a lot.
That was Stephen King. He put Maine on the map. nobody much thought about Maine. I've only driven through it once. I was on my way to Prince Edward Island. I was heading up a research center on the island.
Wow.
And my wife and I drove through Maine to get up to Prince Edward Island. You drive a long way. There's a lot.
It's what's interesting about Maine is that I've been to all 50 states, and Maine was my last state. But somehow I made it everywhere else before I got to Maine. It's just it's not a destination. It's not. It's and I'll tell you, one of the things I did while I was there is I went to Stephen King's house.
Oh, okay. Did he say hello?
No, he wasn't home. Are you originally from Ohio?
No, I'm originally from Michigan. Grew up in Detroit. My wife as well. She grew up in Detroit area. Mm-hmm. And we actually spent about 10 to 12 years in New Jersey, mostly central New Jersey, Flemington, although I worked in Rahway for a couple of years and worked in Trenton for a couple of years. And then we moved. When we left corporate life, we went to Southern Ohio, and we lived in Dayton for about 15 years. So it really kind of came like a home base. And that's why we go back there every summer. But so spent a lot of time in New Jersey, a lot of time in Michigan, and a lot of time in Southern Ohio. People have an odd feeling about Ohio and Middle America in general. My wife, when we were living in Dayton, my wife had a friend who was moving out of New York, had lived in New York City all their life, and they were moving someplace in the Midwest. And they were really concerned because they said, we know that it's a very white bread culture with no, diversity. And my wife said, well, in our neighborhood, we have an interracial couple, a gay couple, a lesbian couple, and I bet you don't have little people, but we have a little person family.
Yeah,
that was just in our neighborhood of like 6 blocks.
It is not what people think it is,
right?
Especially people from the coast, but it is to some extent a little like they think it is.
Yeah, well, every stereotype has some basis in fact.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate Ohio. I had a good time there, and I'm grateful for my experience there.
I'll tell you though, in Ohio, be careful how you talk about your football teams.
Oh yeah,
like Ohio State and stuff like that. That's people. Matter of fact, I wrote a short story that was just published this last year. I have about 20 published short stories right now. I want to put them into an anthology, hopefully sometime soon. But it's about a guy from Michigan passing through rural Ohio, and he happens to have a Michigan sweatshirt on. And a Ohioite takes exception to that. And a whole series of events cascade out of control based on that one little interaction.
Yeah. I can see that they do get pretty serious about their rivalries,
much more serious than I am about sports.
Yeah, most of these horror stories, or they take place in like the hills or the mountains, and it's like backwoods kind of people, like the kind of people you might encounter where you are in Tennessee.
Right.
It's almost never like the flat Midwestern setting, and so I think that would be an interesting place to set up a thriller.
So the location can be really anywhere for a novel, for a thriller. It's all about the characters and what their goals are, what their obstacles they're trying to overcome, how they interact. That's why I always talk about, when I talk about research, I teach about research, I say it's important, but don't get hung up on it.
Yep.
It's simply the seasoning in the soup. It gets the reader hooked. It says, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to believe the rest of it.
Right.
And then I'll get caught up in the characters and what they're doing and things like that.
Right.
But it's less important than a lot of people think it is.
I think one of the greatest examples of that, the juxtaposition of character versus setting that comes to mind for me is Fargo.
Yeah.
And how, you know, Fargo really took the world by storm. It was impressive because it was so radically different. It was nothing takes place in Fargo or Minneapolis, or, you know, in that kind of environment. And really what we're looking at is just a crime drama. You know, it's a crime that went bad.
Absolutely.
And it's just these characters, and you know, those characters could live in New Jersey. Those characters could be in California. You know, they could have done the same types of things in those environments. You know, instead of burying somebody in the snow, they buried them in the desert, or they dropped. You know,
Yellowstone is another good example. It's a nighttime soap opera, but it happens to be set in this panorama of the big ranch in Yellowstone. It could be a ranch in Texas, like you say, or it could be a corporate environment,
Yep.
you know, which is not that different from a big ranch or any big organization.
Right. Yeah, so I think it is. I think the lesson there, of course, is that setting is great for creating an interest, and obviously, you know, if you have an unusual setting that, you know, might resonate with the audience, but ultimately, without good characters and without good, you know, issues, you know, story, well, then there's really nothing to it.
And something I can think of where setting is vitally important to the story is something like To Build a Fire. Jack London's story of survival in 40 degree below zero weather.
Right.
And there, that setting is important, but also it defines the character, because we're dealing with a guy who can't really get his mind around that kind of cold,
Right.
and what it can do. And that's his fatal flaw.
So I've gathered a little bit about who some of your influences are and maybe your favorite authors, which isn't always the same thing. You know, sometimes I appreciate authors, but they don't influence me. But
Right.
I loved Hemingway. I loved the first time I ever went to Key West. I went to Hemingway's house, but one of the things I was going to get at is some of my favorite authors, and this is just because maybe my age or the you know, when I got exposed to things. But my favorite authors were the Beats, you know, Kerouac and Burroughs and that gang of people. And let me tell you, after reading Kerouac and after reading Burroughs and Mexico City is just like places like Mexico City, San Francisco, Kansas City. I mean, these places I really come alive visiting them after having the context of reading through their lens. It's one thing to know a place and then read about it. It's another thing to only know a place because you've read about it, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
And I think there's something to be said for that. So I do appreciate an author's description of location. I do appreciate how they factor in that setting. And for some strange reason, a lot of our conversation has talked about settings today, but that's all right. My podcast is normally a traveling podcast. It's called On the Road because I travel on the road. So, you know, maybe there's just something about doing it, and you've done a lot of traveling and yourself, and so
Yeah, fair amount.
Yep. So it just kind of comes to mind. It all comes full circle. What do we have on the horizon? You've got the books out.
Right. I've got 2 books coming out probably in the first half of 2025. One is Bad Pennies, the sequel to Project Suicide. And the second one is The Peeper, about the serial killer who stalks the social media. And then I'm hoping to get my short stories all bound up into an anthology and try to get that publisher, find a publisher for that in the next, 6 months to a year. I'm also working on, like I said, a horror novel that's based in, my book, The Peeper, is based in a mythical town in Ohio, southern Ohio, called Midlothian. The My horror story, Ars Beneficia, or the Book of Sorcery, is also based in Midlothian. And then I have a kind of a chick lit book, which I completed last year, I think it was, which is also set in Midlothian, Ohio. So I think you could kind of say I have a series built around that location. So yeah, it's another thing. It's a spot where you don't have to worry about people saying either getting upset or that you used their area or didn't use their area. Mm-hmm. It's like Stephen King's mythical Maine town of Castle Rock. You can use the locations around it while just vaguely defining where it is.
Yeah. Like Metropolis or Gotham City. You know, point to Gotham City on a map. Everybody's, it's kind of New Yorky, you know, but it's not exactly New York.
It frees you up from having to be so closely linked to not making any mistakes in location and stuff like that.
Right. We're hitting up on the end of my podcast. So before we say goodbye, how can people find out about you and find your work and keep tabs on you?
You can always check my website, which is thrillerjohnb.net. That's a nice, simple one. My 2 novels that are currently out, easiest way to get to them is through Amazon.
I wish you success with everything, the new books, and of course the books that are out. Everybody, check out John Bukowski on Amazon.
I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. Blues, women, and blues. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. I'm an asshole.